Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. Here at the live studios at Wisteria Cottage, halfway between Canterbury and Folkestone and Hode Farm. It's a beautiful place, actually, in the countryside of England, and England's countryside is famous for being beautiful. Sitting here with a whole room full of spiritual seekers and intellectual giants, you know. We have a person who's been studying literature for 10 years. I'm like a little shy. I got to be really mind my P's and Q's. Jeremy's here at Hare Krishna. He's from Hong Kong, and I'm just by coincidence writing a letter to the devotees in Hong Kong because of they're at Simchi. It's near Kowloon. It's TNT. Exactly. TNT. What is it? Sian Ting Tem. Yeah, it's in that the university, which was the signature of that, was right down the street from from our temple there. So they were having to, tolerate a lot. So I'm writing a, kind of an inspirational letter to them. Anyway, here we are. We renamed this Wisteria College rather than Wisteria Cottage because there's some high-end learning going on here. So welcome to everyone out there in cyberspace. We're up to almost 1,900 followers, and very happy to have you aboard, and extremely happy to have, the devotees from Kent here, as I'm always thinking more and more that Yatra is developing through Master Chaitanya and Hema, their efforts at explaining people what is Krishna consciousness. Okay, before we read the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and I'll give, our new guest, recite the English and the Sanskrit and the English, and it's a prayer glorifying this book that we're reading, the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So if you listen very carefully to the English, I don't think you know Sanskrit yet. Okay, so if you listen carefully to the English, it'll give you an idea of what the book is and how profound it is, and it'll help you to enter. It's called Srimad-Bhagavata Mahima Stotram, and it was composed by Srila Sanatana Goswami, who was the senior Goswami of Vrindavan. This is medieval India when this was written, and he was the senior disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the great reformer and personal expansion, not a personal expansion, he's Krishna himself in the mood of Srimati Radharani, his eternal mood. And it goes like this: Srimad Bhagavata Mahima Stotram, the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kalidwando Ditaditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. Prema means love of God. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka bando mad sangin, mad guru man mahadana, man nistadaga mad bhagya, mad ananda namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu, sadhu tadayin, atini chochatakara, hanamuncha gadachin mam, premna rit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. This is my smoking gun evidence that we should read and hear out loud these books. I have a new motto. It's called Eager to Hear, Ear to Ear. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, we've reached the 10th canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So for our guests, I'm going to give a little explanation of what the Srimad-Bhagavatam is. 5,000 years ago, approximately, there was a literary incarnation of God, Krishna. His name was Vyasadeva. And he, in order to make the Vedas accessible to the human beings on the earth at this time in history of the universe, he edited the Vedas. The original Veda was one stream of thought, or a stream of hymns, which describe mainly the different procedures and personalities that allow for sacrifices to be performed in order to improve one's stature in human life. So he divided that one sound, and that sound that he divided is eternal. It's a co-eternal. It existed before the universe was created, and the codes of how to create the universe and all of the different environments and species of life and everything else that goes with the machine, which is the universe. Like this body is a machine. It's like a small universe. The whole universe is a big machine. And if you can imagine, I don't know if you have some idea how complicated this human body is. They've been studying it for hundreds of years, scientists, and still they don't know how everything goes on in this human body. It's so complex, so deep. Well, the whole universe is like that, multiplied by many times, millions and billions and trillions of times. So the Vedas, Veda means knowledge in Sanskrit language. It's the source of all knowledge. All languages, all branches of knowledge that are capable of a human being to know are originally in the Vedas, and then disseminated throughout the universe by different spiritual authorities, one after another. So he edited that Vedas into 4. It's kind of like if a king had a whole bag full of jewels, but they're all just mixed up. You know, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, and what else. And if you hired some very trustworthy person that won't put the jewels into his pocket to sort them out. So that's what Vedavyas basically did. He sorted out all the hymns that are one category for one kind of sacrifice, and then another category for another site, like that. Rig, Yajur, Atharva, and Sama. These are the 4 Vedas. Then he attached to them the Upanishads. The Upanishads are literatures that take the Karmakanda section of the Vedas, which I just described, which have to do with activities for improving oneself in the material world. That's fruitive activity. And takes it to a philosophical level to try to understand what the difference between matter and spirit is. That's the Upanishads. So then after Vedavyas did that, then he compiled the Mahabharata. And now this was his writing. These other writings were already eternally present, but he just edited them to organize them, to make them more accessible to us, human beings. But he wrote himself the Mahabharata, and he also edited the Puranas. There's 18 major Puranas, which are historical documents, which apply or explain the esoteric ideas in the Vedas, but in a more appreciable or more accessible way through history, histories of kings, the history of the universe, historical events, etc., etc. And then after he did all that, that's already superhuman. No human being can do that in one lifetime. So after he did that, then he decided to summarize the whole thing, and he actually wrote himself the Vedanta Sutra. Yeah, very deep spiritual text. Not so long, but in sutra form, describing everything else that I just described. After that, he wasn't fully satisfied. Yeah. So that's a complex topic, why he wasn't satisfied. Because all knowledge practically that's knowable to mankind he had already given. So just as he was feeling despondent because he wasn't satisfied after doing all of that service for humanity, his spiritual master, Narada Muni, just happens to show up. Of course, nothing happens by chance. And Narada Muni looked at his face and he said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Well, I have a feeling that I've done something wrong because I'm not satisfied after doing all of this literary work." And he said, "Yeah, that's right, because you mixed the goal of human life in with other things. So what you should do is you should compile or bring into the world, a literature that would just be dedicated to the goal of life." And then he went into trance. He went into meditation. And in his meditation, he saw Krishna, the Supreme Absolute Truth, the source of everything, Supreme Being, and the material nature, and everything else. And then he brought the Srimad-Bhagavatam back from his meditation into the world, manifest. And that's what the Srimad-Bhagavatam is, and that's what we're reading from now. It's the Nigamakalpa Tador Galitam Palam. It's the ripened fruit of all of the Vedic scriptures. It's the essence of all the Vedic scriptures, and it only deals with topics that take us from the material platform to the spiritual platform, from the spiritual platform to the devotional platform, finally to pure love of God. We're all seekers of pleasure. Every living being, even the insects, they're seeking pleasure in one way. If you take a worm and stool and you take him out of the stool, he'll crawl right back into the stool because that's where he has a good time. Okay? And every living being is looking for pleasure, satisfaction. That comes from the nature of the spiritual being, the spiritual person that we are. That's why we're all trying to be happy. But in the material world, it's mixed up because the material energy is temporary by nature. But we, as spiritual beings, are not temporary. We're permanent. We're eternal. Just like we've grown from all of us in the room here. Actually, everybody, anyway. We all had a body this big at one point. When we come out of our mother's womb, anyway, we're somewhere in that, dimension. And every single cell of that body has changed now. Every 7 years, all the cells of the human body, they die and are reborn. Did you know that? That's science, biology. And but we remember. Well, I can remember 4 years, certain events that happened to me in 4 years. My spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, who translated and commented on these books we're about to read, remembers when he was 3 months. He remembers lying on the lap of his sister and watching her knit. And he remembers the pattern that she was knitting. That's called a liberated soul. Liberated souls, they don't ever forget. And he was a devotee from the very beginning when he first came out of the womb. And he was seen by others, and it was a big deal to the family, because he was a very religious family, very pious family. He was seen raising himself up on his perambulator, the buggy that babies are carried in, like this, and looking at the deity of Radha and Krishna, Radha Govinda, for hours at a time. Yeah. So that's the level of person that are authoritative enough to understand these books and then present them in language that we can understand. So that's what we're reading tonight. We're reading one chapter, or maybe one or two chapters, from the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The Srimad-Bhagavatam, Bhagavan means the Supreme Being. Bhagavan, the source, the residence of all opulences, in full. We're attractive to one another because we're either beautiful or educated or powerful or famous or knowledgeable or renounced. Those are the opulences that make us attractive to one another. But the Supreme Being has all those attractive features in full. That's Bhagavan. And then Bhagavat is a form of Sanskrit that means pertaining to Bhagavan or about Bhagavan. So Srimad-Bhagavat Purana Bhagavatam is a literature that exclusively deals with Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 335 chapters. You see these blue books here? That's the Srimad-Bhagavatam, from here to there. 18,000 verses with commentary of different personalities in the history of the universe, compiled and put together by my spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder and acharya, or teacher by example, of the Hare Krishna movement. That's a whole other story. We can talk about that later. I want to get to the book, because we have to read the book every day for those of you who are out there waiting for the book to be read. So there's 335 chapters, and those chapters deal with the history of the universe, which, by the way, is 311 trillion years in duration, according to our time. So it can only deal with the essential events in that amount of time. And the essential events it deals with are basically the appearances and disappearances of incarnations of the Supreme Absolute Truth, or incarnations of Krishna, and the most elevated, learned scholars and devotees of those personalities of Godhead. So out of that 335 chapters, 90 chapters is about Krishna. That's the 10th canto. There's 12 cantos, beginning from the basis, or the introduction canto, and then proceeding to explain the history of the universe and the details of how philosophy has developed, and culture, and human society. And then it comes to the 10th canto, which is the story of the life of Krishna when he comes to the earth. And that's 90 chapters. So out of the whole universe, universal history, 90 chapters has to deal with Krishna's appearance on the earth. And when he appears on the earth, he acts like a perfect human being, but much more, because he does things that no human being can do at the same time. So he shows us by example how to live a perfect life, and then he shows how the Supreme Absolute Truth lives, and what he does in order to awaken attachment for the Absolute Truth. So the title of this chapter, we've reached the 58th chapter of the 10th canto of Krishna's pastimes. The title of this chapter, 58, is called Krishna Marries 5 Princesses. Krishna actually marries 16,108 ladies. And he manages a separate palace for each one of them. And if that's not enough, so that those 16,108 women don't have to wait 16,108 days to be with him, he expands his form into 16,108 forms. And he marries all of them simultaneously. That's God. Nobody else can do that. This is history. This is a historical document. But because of our educational system, we've been taught that this is mythology. And therefore, the ability to actually comprehend how the Supreme Being, how unlimitedly powerful and capable the Supreme Being is of doing anything, has been ruined in human society. So what this book is meant to do is to revive that understanding, not just of him, but of the whole universe in relationship to him. Okay, so now we're going to hear something about Krishna. Krishna marries 5 princesses. This chapter describes how Lord Krishna married 5 brides, beginning with Kalindi, and went to Indraprastha to visit the Pandavas. Indraprastha is just next to Delhi in India. After the Pandavas had completed their incognito exile, Lord Krishna went with Satyaki and other Yadus to see them in Indraprastha. The Pandavas greeted the Lord and embraced him in great ecstasy. Their new bride, Draupadi, shyly approached Krishna and bowed down to him. Then the Pandavas properly worshipped and welcomed Satyaki and the Lord's other companions, offering them sitting places. Lord Krishna paid a visit to Queen Kunti, and after he had offered her his respects, they inquired from each other about their family members. As Kunti Devi recalled the various miseries Duryodhana had inflicted upon her and her sons, she remarked that Krishna was their only protector. "You are the well-wisher of the entire universe," she said. "Yet even though you are free from all delusion of mine and others, you nonetheless reside within the hearts of those who meditate on you constantly, and from within their hearts you destroy all their miseries." Then Yudhishthira told Krishna, "Only because we executed many pious acts are we able to see your lotus feet, which even great yogis find impossible to attain." Honored by King Yudhishthira, Sri Krishna happily remained as a guest in Indraprastha for several months. One day, Krishna and Arjuna went hunting in the forest. While bathing in the Yamuna River, they saw a charming young maiden. On Krishna's request, Arjuna went up to the girl and asked who she was. The beautiful maiden replied, "I am Kalindi, the daughter of the sun god, hoping to attain Lord Vishnu as my husband. I have been performing severe austerities. I will accept no one else as my husband, and until he marries me, I will remain in the Yamuna, living in a house my father built for me here." After Arjuna reported all this to Krishna, the omniscient Lord took Kalindi on his chariot, and then the 3 of them returned to Yudhishthira's residence. Later, the Pandavas requested Krishna to build them a city, and he did so by having Vishwakarma, the architect of the demigods, construct one that was extremely attractive. The Lord satisfied his beloved devotees by remaining with them there for some time. Then, to please Agni, the fire god, Krishna arranged to offer him the Khandava forest. The Lord asked Arjuna to burn down the forest and accompanied him as his charioteer. Agni was so satisfied with the offering that he presented Arjuna with the Gandiva bow, a team of horses, a chariot, 2 inexhaustible quivers, and armor. While the Khandava forest burned, Arjuna saved a demon named Maya from the blaze. Maya Danava reciprocated by building Arjuna a splendid palace. In this building, Duryodhana, would later get a good drenching after mistaking the surface of a pond for a solid floor, thus embarrassing himself. Next, Lord Krishna took permission from Arjuna and his other relatives and went back to Dwarka with his entourage. There he married Kalindi. Sometime later, he went to Avantipur, where, in the presence of many kings, he abducted the king of Avanti's sister, Mitravinda, who was very much attracted to him. In the kingdom of Ayodhya lived a devout king named Nagnajit. He had an extraordinarily beautiful marriageable daughter named Satya, or Nagnajiti. The girl's relatives had laid down the stipulation that any man who could subdue a certain group of 7 ferocious bulls would win her hand. When Krishna heard about this princess, he went to Ayodhya with a large contingent of soldiers. King Nagnajit greeted him hospitably and joyfully worshipped him with various offerings. When Satya saw Krishna, she immediately desired him as her husband. And King Nagnajit, understanding his daughter's intentions, informed Lord Krishna of his own wish that the Lord and his daughter be married. The king affectionately told the Lord, "You alone would be a suitable husband for my daughter, and if you subdue the 7 bulls, you may certainly marry her." Lord Krishna then manifested himself in 7 separate forms and subdued the 7 bulls. King Nagnajit duly presented his daughter to the Lord together with a dowry of abundant gifts, and the Lord took Satya onto his chariot for the journey back to Dwarka. Just then, the rival kings who had been defeated by the bulls tried to attack Lord Krishna, but Arjuna easily beat them back, and Krishna proceeded with Nagnajiti to Dwarka. Subsequently, Sri Krishna married Lakshmana, the royal daughter of the king of Madra, after abducting her from her Swayamvara ceremony, and he also married Bhadra, a princess of the Kaikeya kingdom. That's a summary of the chapter. Now we'll do the texts and commentaries. Shri Shuka Uvacha Ekada Pandavan Drashtum Pratitan Purushottama Indraprastham Gatak Shriman Yuyudana Dibir Ritaha. Shukadev Goswami said, once the supremely opulent personality of Godhead went to Indraprastha to visit the Pandavas, who had again appeared in public. Accompanying the Lord were Yuyudan and other associates. Purport: almost everyone except Lord Krishna and Lord Balarama had thought the Pandavas perished in a fire set by Duryodhana in the house of lac. Now the Pandavas had appeared again in public, and Krishna was paying them a visit. Text 2. When the Pandavas saw that Lord Mukunda had arrived, those heroic sons of Pritha all stood up at once, like the senses responding to the return of the life air. Purport: the metaphor used here is quite poetic. When a person is unconscious, the senses do not function. But when consciousness returns to the body, all the senses spring to life at once and begin functioning. Similarly, the Pandavas all stood up at once, enlivened to receive their Lord, Sri Krishna. Text 3. The heroes embraced Lord Achyuta, and the touch of his body freed them of sin. Looking at his affectionate, smiling face, They were overwhelmed with joy. Purport. Srila Jiva Goswami explains that since the Pandavas were never sinful, the term enasa here refers to the suffering caused by separation from Krishna. That unhappiness was now vanquished by the Lord's return. Text 4. After the Lord bowed down at the feet of Yudhishthira and Bhima and firmly embraced Arjuna, he accepted obeisances from the twin brothers Nakula and Sahadev. Those are the 5 Pandavas. Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadev. Purport. Externally, Krishna was the Pandavas' cousin, and their relationship was just like that between cousin brothers. Because Yudhishthira and Bhima were externally senior to Krishna, the Lord bowed down at their feet. Whereas he embraced his peer, Arjuna, and accepted obeisances from the younger brothers, Nakula and Sahadev. These are the laws of nature being exhibited by Krishna himself. Sometimes inexperienced devotees think it is sinful to honor or bow down to an elder brother in Krishna consciousness. But from Lord Krishna's example here, we may conclude that offering all respects to a senior brother in Krishna consciousness is not sinful. Text 5. Faultless Draupadi, the Pandava's newly married wife, slowly and somewhat timidly approached Lord Krishna, who sat on an exalted seat, and offered him her obeisances. Purport. Srimati Draupadi was so devoted to Krishna that she herself was called Krsna, which is the feminine form of the name. And Arjuna was also called Krishna because of his devotion to the Lord. Similarly, the devotees of the modern Krishna consciousness movement are often called the Krishnas. So it appears that the custom of addressing Krishna devotees by his name has a long history. Actually, in that regard, Srila Prabhupada was not an ordinary person, obviously, from what I told you already about his childhood. But he expressed his deep pleasure that his movement was not known by his name. Everybody wants the thing that they do to be known, that they did it. That's the nature of material existence. But spiritual existence is different. In spiritual existence, the more advanced we become, the more expert we become, the less we think we're expert, the less we think we've done. And therefore humility becomes deep and meaningful and attractive. So anyway, Prabhupada was very happy, and once he commented, he was traveling from South Africa, I think, or somewhere down under to Europe, and he stopped, he had to go through Athens, Greece, airport, in the middle of the night, 12 o'clock, there was hardly anybody around. And this one young man came up and saw him from a distance and went like this, "Hare Krishna!" And Prabhupada just became ecstatic. And he said, this is the proof the Krishna consciousness movement is spreading all over the world. In the middle of the night in the Athens airport, somebody sees me and chants Hare Krishna just by looking at me. How is it possible that anything else is happening? So he was proud that the movement was known as the Hare Krishna movement, and we are all called the Krishnas. Of course, evidence has to be evaluated to be able to be assimilated and made real to us. So the evidence is there. Now it's up to us to evaluate it and embrace it or not. Text 6. Satyaki also accepted a seat of honor after receiving worship and welcome from the Pandavas, and the Lord's other companions, being duly honored, sat down in various places. Text 7. The Lord then went to see his aunt, Queen Kunti. He bowed down to her, and she embraced him, her eyes moist with great affection. Lord Krishna inquired from her and her daughter-in-law, Draupadi, about their welfare, and they in turn questioned him at length about his relatives in Dwarka. Purport. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur envisions that as Lord Krishna was sitting on his seat, he saw his aunt Kunti approaching in great eagerness to see him. He then rose at once, quickly went up to her, and offered his obeisances to her. Her eyes moistened with extreme love. She embraced him and smelled his head. Text 8. So overcome by love that her throat choked up and her eyes filled with tears, Queen Kunti remembered the many troubles she and her sons had endured. Thus she addressed Lord Krishna, who appears before his devotees to drive away their distress. Anybody in distress? Nobody's in distress? Okay. Anyway, if you are, you can get rid of the distress by coming and joining the Hare Krishna movement. Text 9. Queen Kunti said, all we do is associate with Krishna. And because we're associating with the source of everything, we find ourselves quite comfortable and happy. Queen Kunti said, my dear Krishna, our welfare was assured only when you remembered us, your relatives, and gave us your protection by sending my brother to visit us. Text 10. For you, the well-wishing friend and supreme soul of the universe, there is never any illusion of us and them. Yet even so, residing within the hearts of all, you eradicate the sufferings of those who remember you constantly. So you want to know how to be happy? Just remember Krishna constantly. And it's in every scripture of the world. It's not this, we're not the only ones who are saying this. In the Bible it says, love the Lord thy God with all thy soul, all thy heart, all thy strength, and all thy mind. And here it says, you eradicate the sufferings of those who remember you constantly. Purport. The intelligent Queen Kunti here points out that even though Lord Krishna is dealing with her affectionately as a relative, he is not compromising his position as the well-wishing soul of the universe. In other words, the Lord doesn't play favorites. As he says in the Bhagavad Gita 9:29, Samoham sarvabhuteshu, I am equal to everyone. So while the Lord reciprocates with all souls, it is natural that those who love him intensely receive his special attention, for they want him and nothing else. Text 11. King Yudhishthira said, O Supreme Controller, I do not know what pious deeds we fools have done so that we can see you, whom the masters of yogic perfection rarely see. 12. Requested by the king to stay with them, the Almighty Lord remained happily in Indraprastha during the months of the rainy season, giving joy to the eyes of the city's residents. Purport. If possible, the readers of Bhagavatam should try to correctly chant the Sanskrit verses, which are exquisitely poetic. Ekada ratam aruya. That's the next Sanskrit verse. Once Arjuna, the slayer of powerful enemies, donned his armor, mounted his chariot, flying the flag of Hanuman, took up his bow and his two inexhaustible quivers, and went to sport with Lord Krishna in a large forest filled with fierce animals. Purport. This incident must have taken place after the burning of the Khandava forest, since Arjuna was now using the Gandiva bow and other weapons that he had acquired during that incident. 15. With his arrows, Arjuna shot tigers, boars, and buffalo in that forest, along with rurus, shabas, gavayas, rhinoceroses, black deer, and other animals, rabbits and porcupines. Text 16. A crew of servants carried to King Yudhishthira the slain animals fit to be offered in sacrifice on some special occasion. Then, feeling thirsty and tired, Arjuna went to the bank of the Yamuna. Purport. As Srila Prabhupada often explained, the Kshatriyas, or warriors, would hunt in the forest for several purposes: to practice their fighting skills, to control the population of ferocious beasts, that means man-killers, who were a threat to human beings, and to provide animals for Vedic sacrifices. The killed animals would be given new bodies by the power of the sacrifices. Since priests no longer have that power, the sacrifices would now constitute mere killing and are thus forbidden. In the fourth canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, we find that the great sage Narada severely chastised King Prachinuvarishat for abusing this principle of authorized hunting. In fact, the king had become like modern sportsmen who cruelly kill animals as a so-called hobby. There's one very famous politician over the last cycle, maybe 2 cycles ago, whose favorite sport was to go into a helicopter with a high-powered rifle and kill animals from the forest. After the 2 kings bathed there, they drank the river's clear water. The great warriors then saw an attractive young girl walking nearby. Text 18. Sent by his friend, Arjuna approached the exceptional young woman who possessed beautiful hips, fine teeth, and a lovely face, and inquired from her as follows. Purport. Krishna wanted Arjuna to see the deep devotion of this girl, and he thus urged him to make the initial inquiries. 19. Arjuna said, "Who are you, O fine waisted lady? Whose daughter are you, and where do you come from? What are you doing here? I think you must be looking for a husband. Please explain everything, O beautiful one." Text 20. Sri Kalindi said, "I am the daughter of the sun god. I desire to get as my husband the most excellent and munificent Lord Vishnu, and to that end I am performing severe penances." Purport. As Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out, Srimati Kalindi correctly understood that Lord Vishnu, being the source of all benedictions, is the supreme husband and can thus fulfill all the desires of his wife. Text 21. I will accept no husband other than him, the abode of the goddess of fortune. May that Mukunda, the Supreme Personality, the shelter of the helpless, be pleased with me. Purport. The beautiful Kalindi here reveals some apprehension. She insists that she will not accept any husband except Lord Krishna. And she states that he is the shelter for those who have no other master. Since she will accept no other shelter, Krishna must give her shelter. Also, she says, tushyatam me sabhagavan. May that Supreme Lord be pleased with me. This is her prayer. As Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out, although Kalindiya, a young helpless girl staying in a secluded place, she is not afraid. This staunch faith in and devotion for Lord Krishna is the ideal Krishna consciousness, and Srimati Kalindi's desire will soon be fulfilled. Text 22. I am known as Kalindi, and I live in a mansion my father built for me within the water of the Yamuna. There I will stay until I meet Lord Achyuta. Purport. Since Kalindi was a beloved child of the sun god himself, who would dare disturb her? From this incident, we can appreciate the beautiful spiritual processes executed in previous ages by great souls. Unlike the so-called love in worldly love affairs, beautiful Kalindi's love for Lord Krishna was pure and perfect. Even though Kalindi was a tender young girl, her determination to marry Krishna was so strong that she arranged for her father to build her a house in the Yamuna where she could perform severe austerities until the day her beloved came. 23. Shukadeva Goswami continued, Arjuna repeated all this to Lord Vasudeva, who was already aware of it. The Lord then took Kalindi onto his chariot and went back to see King Yudhishthira. Text 24. Describing a previous incident, Shukadeva Goswami said, upon the request of the Pandavas, Lord Krishna had Vishwakarma build them a most wonderful and amazing city. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti mentions that this city was constructed before the burning of the Kandava forest, and hence before the Lord found his bride, Kalindi. The Supreme Lord stayed in that city for some time to please his devotees. On one occasion, Sri Krishna wanted to give the Kandava forest as a gift to Agni, and so the Lord became Arjuna's charioteer. Purport. Srila Jiva Goswami explains the sequence of events that occurred during during the Lord's stay with the Pandavas. He states that first the Kandava forest was burned, then Kalindi was found, then the city was constructed, then the assembly hall was presented to the Pandavas. Text 26. Being pleased, O king, Lord Agni presented Arjuna with a bow, a set of white horses, a chariot, a pair of inexhaustible quivers, and armor that no fighter could pierce with weapons. Text 27. When the demon Maya was saved from the fire by his friend Arjuna, Maya presented him with an assembly hall in which Duryodhana would later mistake water for a solid floor. Text 28. Then Lord Krishna, given leave by Arjuna and other well-wishing relatives and friends, returned to Dwarka with Satyaki and the rest of his entourage. 29. The supremely auspicious Lord then married Kalindi on a day when the season, the lunar asterism, and the configurations of the sun and other heavenly bodies were all propitious. In this way, he brought the greatest pleasure to his devotees. Text 30. Vindhya and Anuvindhya, who shared the throne of Avanti, were followers of Duryodhana's. When the time came for their sister Mitravinda to select her husband in the Swayamvara ceremony, they forbade her to choose Krishna, although she was attracted to him. Purport. The feelings of enmity between the Kurus and the Pandavas were so strong that Mitravinda's brothers, out of friendship for Duryodhana, forbade the young maiden to accept Krishna as her husband. 31. My dear king, Lord Krishna forcibly took away Princess Mitravinda, the daughter of his aunt Rajadidevi, before the eyes of the rival kings. See, one of Krishna's missions on this earth is to relieve its burden. Just like when kings or so-called kings become so powerful and so inimical to others, they build up armies. Just like today we can see there's certain countries who are building up, huge military forces, and they become a burden on the earth, no matter where they are, no matter what they are. So one of Krishna's missions was to take care of that and relieve the burden of the earth. That's why he does all these heavy things. But the other thing that he does is he promotes and he protects and enlivens his devotees. That's what's going on here. He's enlivening the devotees and he's winding up the demons so that when he does have to deal with them, they're ready to be dealt with. My dear king, Lord Krishna forcibly took away Princess Mitravinda, the daughter of his aunt Rajadi Devi, before the eyes of the rival kings. He's winding them up. 32. O king, Nagnajit, the very pious king of Koshala, had a lovely daughter named Satya, or Nagnajiti. The kings who came as suitors were not allowed to marry her unless they could subdue 7 sharp-horned bulls. These bulls were extremely vicious and uncontrollable, and they could not tolerate even the smell of warriors. 34. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of the Vaishnavas, heard of the princess who was to be won by the conqueror of the bulls, he went to the capital of Koshala with a large army. 35. The king of Koshala, pleased to see Lord Krishna, worshipped him by rising from his throne and offering him a seat of honor and substantial gifts. Lord Krishna also greeted the king respectfully. 36. When the king's daughter saw that most agreeable suitor arrive, she immediately desired to have him, the lord of the goddess Rama. She prayed, "May he become my husband. If I have kept my vows, may the sacred fire bring about the fulfillment of my hopes." 37. Goddess Lakshmi, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the rulers of the various planets placed the dust of his lotus feet on their heads. And to protect the codes of religion, which he has created, he assumes pastime incarnations at various times. How may that Supreme Personality of Godhead become pleased with me? Text 38. King Nagnajit first worshipped the Lord properly and then addressed him. O Narayana, Lord of the universe, you are full in your own spiritual pleasure. Therefore, what can this insignificant person do for you? 39. Shukadeva Goswami said, O beloved descendant of Kuru, the Supreme Lord was pleased, and after accepting a comfortable seat, he smiled and addressed the king in a voice as deep as the rumbling of a cloud. 40. The Supreme Lord said, O ruler of men, learned authorities condemn begging for a person in the royal order who is executing his religious duties. Even so, Desiring your friendship, I ask you for your daughter, though we offer no gifts in exchange. The king said, My lord, who could be a better husband for my daughter than you, the exclusive abode of all transcendental qualities? On your body, the goddess of fortune herself resides, never leaving you for any reason. But to ascertain the proper husband for my daughter, O chief of the Sattvatas, we previously set a condition to test the prowess of her suitors. Purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti, the king's actual purpose in setting up the test was to obtain Sri Krishna as his son-in-law, since only he could subdue the bulls. Without such a test, it would have been difficult for Nagnajit to refuse the many apparently qualified princes and kings who came to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. Text 43. These 7 wild bulls are impossible to tame. O hero, they have defeated many princes, breaking their limbs. Mm, 44. If you can subdue them, O descendant of Yadu, you will certainly be the appropriate bridegroom for my daughter, O Lord of Shri. Upon hearing these terms, the Lord tightened his clothing, expanded himself into 7 forms, and easily subdued the bulls. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Lord Krishna expanded himself into 7 forms not only to playfully defeat the 7 bulls, but also to show Princess Satya that she would not have to compete with his other queens, since he could enjoy with all of them simultaneously. 46. Lord Shori tied up the bulls, whose pride and strength were now broken, and pulled them with ropes, just as a child playfully pulls wooden toy bulls. 47. Then King Nagnajit, pleased and astonished, presented his daughter to Lord Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead accepted this suitable bride in the proper Vedic fashion. Purport. The word Sadrishim indicates that the lovely princess was a fitting bride for the Lord because she possessed wonderful transcendental qualities that complemented his. As Srila Jiva Goswami points out, the word Vismita indicates that King Nagnajit was certainly astonished at the many extraordinary events suddenly taking place in his life. 48. The king's wives felt the greatest ecstasy upon attaining Lord Krishna as the dear husband of the royal princess, and a mood of great festivity arose. Conch shells, horns, and drums resounded, along with vocal and instrumental music, and the sounds of brahmanas invoking blessings. The joyful men and women adorned themselves with fine clothing and garlands. 50 and 51. As the dowry, powerful King Nagnajit gave 10,000 cows, 3,000 young maidservants wearing golden ornaments on their necks and bedecked with fine clothing, 9,000 elephants, 100 times as many chariots as elephants, 100 times as many horses as chariots, and 100 times as many manservants as horses. That's a big number. 52. O King of Koshala, his heart melting with affection, had the bride and groom seated on their chariot, and then he sent them on their way, surrounded by a great army. Text 53. When the intolerable kings who had been rival suitors heard what had happened, they tried to stop Lord Krishna on the road as he took his bride home. But just as the bulls had broken the king's strength before, the Yadu warriors broke it now. 54. Arjuna, wielder of the Gandiva bow, was always eager to please his friend Krishna, and thus he drove back those opponents who were shooting torrents of arrows at the Lord. He did this just as a lion drives away insignificant animals. Text 55. Lord Devaki Sutta, the chief of the Yadus, then took the dowry and Satya to Dwarka and continued to live there happily. Bhadra was a princess of the Kaikeya kingdom and the daughter of Lord Krishna's paternal aunt, Shrutakirti. The Lord married Bhadra when her brothers, headed by Santardana, offered her to him. Then the Lord married Lakshmana, the daughter of the king of Bhadra. Krishna appeared alone at her Swayambara ceremony and took her away, just as Garuda once stole the demigod's nectar. Lord Krishna also acquired thousands of other wives, equal to these, when he killed Bhaumasura and freed the beautiful maidens the demon was holding captive. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 58th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Krishna Marries 5 Princesses. Jai Shri Krishna. Hari Bol. So we clap after every chapter because it's like an act to a grand drama, and each one of these acts has unlimited lessons in morality, spiritual character, and so many other things. Devotion, pure devotion. So now we have had our reading, we've had a little explanation for all of you. Now we have an interesting session that's called our open mic session. We've got a mic, and if there's any points that came from the reading that stuck in your mind, or anything that you're curious about, that you want to discuss more deeply, or you want to reflect to us about, you want to give realizations, this is your moment. With that, the ball is in your court. Mantra Chaitanya, I knew you would have something. You'd be able to start us off at least.
Hold it by this?
Yeah.
Right. Like this. Okay. Hare Krishna, thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Mantra Chaitanya. And thank you for bringing these lovely guests from the University of Canterbury, I believe. Is it? Thank you, gentlemen, for coming.
So one thing jumped out at me, which was sometimes people have a tendency, for some reason, to latch on to when Srila Prabhupada says things, like he makes some statements such as women maybe are less intelligent than men or something like this. People often have a tendency, in our experience, to latch on to a statement like that, and often not realizing that Prabhupada also says many things about men and everybody, talking about their different conditions.
What to speak of the positive things he says about women.
Yeah.
Oodles of things.
And I noticed in here, in the purport, although it wasn't written by Prabhupada, but the purport's referred to Queen Kunti as being intelligent there. And I just wondered if you could explain.
I'd be very happy to do that. Thank you very much for the questions. It's potent and it's relevant. Not only is Kunti intelligent, but there's a chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam dedicated to her prayers to Lord Krishna. And anybody who reads those prayers will understand how intelligent she is. So, when Prabhupada makes these statements and when the Vedas talk about the differences between male and female psychology, he doesn't mean that they're stupid. Just look what women have done in the history of the universe. They're not stupid. They can control the whole, planet. There's all kinds of historical events in which a woman has, wound the emperor around her little finger and just, controlled the whole situation. And in India, in the culture, the ladies, they don't come right out in front so much. They're shy by nature. The feminine nature is shy. Even a man who has feminine qualities is shyer than, the macho, Kshatriya-oriented, person. And but from that position of being shy, because it's so attractive to the men, they become subdued and controlled. It's power. And another thing is that in the Vedic culture, the men are trained from the time they were little children to address all women as mother, Mataji. They would live in the house of the Gurukula, and they would go out and beg alms from the neighborhood, and every woman that came to the door, they would call her Mataji. Mataji, we're begging alms for our Guru, could you please give something? And of course they would. And in this way, they became accustomed their whole time they're growing up that any woman, other than their wife, and because later on they could get married, and you don't see your wife as your mother, that's a little bit, rasa basa, it's a little bit inconsistent, incompatible, and it would be awkward. So these are symptoms of knowledge and symptoms of wisdom, which the modern society has completely lost the thread about. So those people who go off on these kind of subjects, they have to be explained things like we're explaining things, very cool-headedly, with, like you were saying, putting all the evidence before rather than taking one sentence out of context and making a whole case. But that's what happens, The internet generation, that it used to be, a month's cycle, news cycle, and then it went down to a week. Now it's down to less than 24 hours, Something comes up and it's, this is news, and 5 minutes later, because there's so many other things that people know about, it just gets submerged in an ocean of news items, So like this, people have become, of this modern age, they become critical of anything and everyone. So all I can say about that is that if anyone is honest and sincere and open-minded and reads the whole Bhagavatam cover to cover and puts that kind of doubt on the shelf rather than coming to a conclusion and rejecting it offhand by one statement or one thing that they've heard, then by the time they finish the Bhagavatam, they will be so impressed and enlightened and enlivened that they'll see it in proper perspective, these so-called controversial statements. Okay, so everyone now wants to be equal, whether it be men or women or children and adults or, students or whatever. But is the world more peaceful? As they achieve one of those goals after another, is the world more peaceful? I've been living in this world for 73 years. And in my lifetime, I've never seen a time where there's so much violence and so much unnecessary quarreling and disturbances on all levels, ecological or social or economic or even marital, familial. It's just breaking apart. The human society is breaking apart. It's breaking apart because they're rejecting the very glue, or that's not a very good word, or force, the forces of morality and spirituality that hold, families together and hold, societies together and cause an atmosphere that is conducive to peace. And as it said in the Gita, there's this one very nice verse that describes this in the Bhagavad Gita. At the end of the second chapter, Krishna says, he says, Nasti buddhir ayuktasya, not cha yuktasya bhavana, not cha bhavyatak shantir, ashantasya kuta sukham. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So now we're in an age where the principles that hold human society together and cause a peaceful atmosphere in which people can be happy, but more than that, they can search for truth, search for the goal of life, even think about the goal of life. There's nobody who's even thinking about the goal of life. Just go out into the street and ask anybody, do you know what the goal of life is? Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to stand up and say what's the truth in a world in which, falsity has become truth in some people's minds is very difficult. Therefore, at the end of the fourth chapter, Krishna says, therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharat, stand and fight. So we're not fighting in the sense of, with weapons and killing and all of that, but we're fighting ignorance. We're at war against ignorance. So if anybody's interested, Hare Krishna, here it is. Read it from cover to cover, and then let's talk. Of course, we can talk before you read it from cover to cover, but it's poetic justice to such controversy. My pleasure. Nowadays, they have these TED Talks and, PowerPoint symposium, seminars, and the main thing is for the person who's speaking just to become, an entertainer and get followers and money and women and
Celebrity.
and a celebrity, yeah. But if you tell the truth, you're liable not to be, what's the word? Popular. There's a very nice, there's a very nice statement by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, if I can find it. I just upgraded this, and not everything works, but most of it does. Maybe let me see if I can find it quickly. If I can't find it quickly, I'll just paraphrase it. Yes. Yes. This is from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He was asked the question, how should we preach to ordinary people? Here's his answer. Human beings carry a variety of diseases, and each needs to be treated individually. Unless the disease is properly diagnosed, proper treatment cannot be administered, and the ailment will not be cured. A platform speaker cannot do much for most sick people. He can give only token relief. I have not found anyone sincerely interested in Krishna consciousness for 40 years. This is 150 years ago in Bengal. What to speak of now? Now, whoever comes to me is not interested in hearing Harikatha. They are not ready to give up their dependence on their own education and intelligence. In this world, people like to become popular. They do not like to inquire about the absolute truth. Those who claim to be religious preachers are busy trying to protect their own existence by flattering others. By speaking and hearing the truth, one's popularity is unlikely to be enhanced. Therefore, we are not interested in the sympathy or support of ordinary people who are averse to the Lord. That's the answer. What about our philosophers and literary geniuses in the room? Do we have some? And there's got to be some things that came into your minds during that reading. There was so many far out things in it. Yes, sir. Anthony.
It's sort of related to the ignorance that we spoke of, and how it's ignorance that's the guiding force against being aware of Krishna.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask about people that worship Shiva, and Shiva's characterized as being he's controlling the motivations, and why is it so popular that people are worshipping Shiva when there's Krishna, who's
Well, there's two things. Thank you very much. That's an excellent progeny to be created, or creation to take place, rather. So, when Vishnu glances at the material nature, who's feminine, Durga, that glance is his aspect of Sadashiva. Sadashiva is an aspect of Lord Vishnu. And that glance, when it touches the material energy, it transforms into Shiva or Shambhu. Therefore, Shiva is described to be the father of all living beings. But it's Vishnu who's actually the father. But because he touches the material energy, and he is transformed into a qualitative incarnation of the Lord who's in charge of the mode of ignorance, he, at the beginning of the creation, when Lord Brahma, who's the creator, the creative qualitative incarnation of passion, when he started to create the universe, he asked the four Kumaras, who were the first mind-born sons of Lord Brahma, they refused to get married. They wanted to stay brahmachari. So in order to do that, they kept themselves as 5 years old, looking like they were 5 years old, and ran around naked, so nobody was attracted to them. So they didn't have to worry about getting married. So then when the Kumaras said no, Lord Brahma, who is personified passion, was angry at first. Of course, he controlled his anger because he's the most intelligent living being in the universe. And from his eye, right here between his eyes, Lord Shiva came out. That's how he entered into the universe, personified. So he agreed. Okay. So we started having progeny, but they were running around and destroying everything because they were in the mode of ignorance. And then Vishnu and they were wrecking Brahma's creation. So Brahma said, okay, Lord Shiva, just go do austerities and until your services are needed, because he is in control of ignorance, and therefore when the whole universe needs to be dissolved, he starts it off with fire. So because of that nature, he doesn't care about anything. He's very renounced. He doesn't have a house. He lives underneath a tree. He doesn't dress, nicely. But because he is who he is, he's very attractive to people who are in ignorance. And so they approach him. And because he wants to meditate on Vishnu, that's all he wants to do is meditate on Krishna. You know how you've ever had a beggar come to you and, they're pestering you and they're, in the window of the car, in the stoplight in Delhi, this, so, and after a while, if it's a long stoplight or you're in a traffic jam, you want them to go to someone else, so you just roll down the window and give them something and then they go away. That's Lord Shiva. Ignorant people come to him for opulence, and in order to not be distracted and be bothered for what he wants to do, which is pure devotional service to Vishnu, he gives it. Now Krishna, on the other hand, he wants everyone to come back to him. And so when he sees that a person is too attached to the material nature, rather than just giving more, which is going to make them fall further, he withdraws it or takes it away, or until they finally come to him and surrender to him. That's the difference between Shiva and Krishna or Vishnu. I mean, there are stories in the Puranas about demons who have gotten benedictions from Lord Shiva that ended up being not very pleasant for anyone, even Lord Shiva. There was one guy called Vrikasura, and he did a very severe austerity to please Lord Shiva. He was even cutting his own flesh and putting it into the fire. Stupid, ignorant, mode of ignorance. This is mode of ignorance, to torture your own body in order to get what you want from the gods, So finally, when he was just ready to cut off his head, because Shiva wasn't showing up, Lord Shiva came to me and said, "What are you doing? You don't have to cut off your head to please me. What do you want, you know?" So this guy was a real rascal, actually. And he says, "I want the benediction that if I put my hand on anyone's head, it will break to pieces." And he was thinking that that was a big benediction because I can control anyone and everything with this benediction. So Lord Shiva just said, "All right." He knows, but he just says, "All right, just get out of here, you know." So he gave him that benediction, and then the Trikasura looked at Lord Shiva. "I think I'll test it on you." And Lord Shiva started, no, not me. And then anyway, eventually Lord Vishnu came as a little Brahmin boy and reasoned with this demon and said, "I don't think Shiva could do something like that. Do you?" No, he can't do anything. "If you don't believe me, go ahead and try. Touch your own head." He didn't get that. You didn't get that benediction. He said, "Oh yes, I did. Watch this." Boom. And he was finished. So Lord Shiva is easily pleased and easily disturbed. So he doesn't carefully give his benedictions in a way that they will selectively cause the person to come closer to Krishna quicker. Whereas Krishna does just that. And in Lord Shiva's own life, and if you read the prayers by Lord Shiva in the Srimad-Bhagavatam and other Puranas, he always worships Sankarshan or Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna. Is that something? Hare Krishna. I know it's a challenge. Yeah. Don't feel pressure. Don't feel pressure.
There's something online.
Something online. We have from Cyberspace. We have something. Who's it from?
This is from Doyle Nitai Das in Belgium.
From Dial Nitai in Belgium. He asks great questions. Sometimes he asks tongue twisters you can't answer. Go ahead, Dial.
Says, "Respected Srila Guru Maharaj, please accept my obeisances. All glories to your holiness. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. In the purport of text 4, it is said that inexperienced devotees sometimes think that it is sinful to offer respect to an elder brother. I fail to understand how that could possibly be so. If you consider it a suitable inquiry, kindly do explain."
Read it again.
In the
Sinful
purport,
people.
it says that inexperienced devotees sometimes think that it is
Inexperienced devotees sometimes think that it is sinful
to offer respect to an elder brother.
To offer respect to elders. So you're saying, my dear Dalitai, that how can we accept that something like that can be true? The reason is because you're not sinful. And therefore it doesn't make any sense that someone could be, disrespectful to a senior brother. All you have to do is look around, open your eyes, and just look around. What's going? Read the headlines. You don't have to read the newspapers because it's full of. Just read the news, just the headlines. What's going on today?
I think it was saying that in the purport that it's sinful to offer respect.
No, it
That
says
some people think that
inexperienced people think it.
Yes.
So he's not saying that that's true.
Yeah.
He's saying that people who are stupid think that.
Right. Yeah.
It's actually not true.
Yeah.
So the very wording of it means the opposite.
Oh, yeah. And he asked, how is that possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
it's possible when people have become ignorant enough, they can think anything. They can accept anything. We don't accept that it's sinful, you know. Therefore, we have, I mean, of course, Dalai Lama is a very thoughtful person. You know him, he's very thoughtful. But we have to be thoughtful, you know, to understand these purports. Read the now, based on what I just said, or looking through it, now read it again.
Read his question again?
Read the quote that he's questioning about. Yeah, read the question and the quote and the question.
It says in the purport of text 4, it is said that inexperienced devotees sometimes think that it is sinful to offer respect to an elder brother. That's all.
And then he's saying he can't understand how that's possible.
I fail to understand how that could possibly be so.
That's because you're experienced and cultured. I mean, inexperienced here can be taken in context. Persons who are actually don't understand things very well. When a person first comes, they may hear so many things that they can't, you know, see properly. Anyway, I answered the question. It means that the inexperienced person's not seeing it properly, and it's not saying that it's sinful to offer respect to a senior brother, an older brother. That's not what it's saying. It's saying the opposite. And that it's a poetic way of saying it, rather than saying it directly. That's why we need commentaries and we need explanations, especially in the beginning when we're inexperienced. So maybe he'll write whether you can type down whether I answered your question properly, or you want to continue to drill deeper. I've got to stop by 8 o'clock. I got an appointment, phone appointment, 8 o'clock.
He said, "Thank you for your explanation. It is clear now."
Hot seat, you know. It's a hot seat. Yes.
I was reading some of the Bhagavad Gita today, actually, before I came here. And I was looking at something that Srila Prabhupada said, and he was talking about this kind of trembling, actually how there can be two kinds of feelings when the body kind of trembles. He said one's in spiritual ecstasy and one's in fear on the battle before Arjuna is going into battle.
Yes.
And I saw today, especially when different devotees would come face to face with Krishna, that you could tell just from the way that it was written that there was a lot of that spiritual ecstasy there in the meeting between the devotees and Krishna.
Yes.
What I wanted to ask about is, so in the modern world, I think that there's a strong disconnect from people and spirituality. But what I was wondering is, one of the things I remember Prabhupada saying, I don't know the whole quote, but he said, someone asked him once about which religion is correct, and I think how he responded was, what matters is, are you following, I think was I can't remember the first lines of the thing, but I remember what matters is, are you following, how are you following? And if one were to feel a sincere love or a similar spiritual ecstasy when thinking of Christ or other spiritual figures, how you feel like is that still, can liberation, as long as the love is sincere, what you'd say about that?
We think that Lord Jesus Christ is our guru. He's a Shaktivesh avatar. He's a representative of God. But because the persons around him were not very cultured or spiritually advanced, he couldn't say very much because they couldn't understand very much. So if they follow him, they will come to love of God. They may not come to pure Shuddha Sattva love of God. It may be mixed with other things or whatever. but it is the right thing to do. But if they don't follow him, then they go to hell. And the same goes with all the major religions of the world, the teachings, rather. So rather than look at an individual person or an individual group and make some kind of sectarian conclusion to pit groups of people against one another for just because of ignorance, we look at what the teaching is, and if the teaching takes one towards love of God, then we accept it. Savai parama paro dharmo, savai dharma paro dharmo, bhakti yoga hoksajay. So the supreme, wait a second, I misquoted that. Savai pung samparo dharmo, yato bhakti yoga hoksajay, yes. If the religious principle that you're following, and if you're following it, brings one to a sense of love for God, then it's to be accepted as correct. But, for instance, in the American culture, well, maybe that would be nice if they did have a culture. I'm American and I can speak from personal experience. I'm not attached to being an American, but on the dollar bill it says, "In God we trust." So Prabhupada would say about that that's a very nice statement. But who do you trust? Do you trust someone you don't know? Can you trust someone who you don't know anything about? So he would say, if you actually know who God is and how trustworthy he is, and therefore, based on that principle, you follow the principles that he teaches, then we say, yes, that's good. But if you start speculating and changing the teachings in order to select the things that you like and reject the things you don't like in order for your own personal either aggrandizement or sense gratification or whatever, fame or anything, money or women or anything, then you're a rascal, cheater. But that doesn't mean that all the teachings are exactly the same either. They may be of the same subject, like mathematics as a subject. But you can't expect a student in first grade arithmetic to understand advanced calculus or physics. Neither can you expect a person from advanced calculus or physics to be satisfied in the first grade arithmetic class. But the subject is the same. Relationship of the integers. All levels of mathematics are based on even computer science is based on the relationship of the integers. Without knowing those things, you can't know anything about physics. Therefore, Krishna says, "Yo mam evam asa mudho janadi purushottama sasarva vid bhajanti mam sarva bhavina bharata." If you know Krishna without doubting is the supreme absolute truth, then you're the knower of everything. Even if you don't know everything yet. Because you have the tools to understand the complete picture. Just as if you know the integers very well in the relationships, you have the tools to find out about advanced integral calculus or physics or computer science. Yes, sir. Jeremy.
So, given that Jesus Christ is a guru of Krishna, and what he says is by truth of Krishna, and how the book of Revelations in the Bible speaks of perhaps the second coming of Christ, and also aside of that, the idea of hell and damnation that he speaks of, is that a contradiction, or does it lead back to Krishna? Or
Let's go two angles, since you're a student of literature. Okay, what is the description of the apocalypse?
So there's the 7 trumpets.
No, he's riding a white horse, and he's carrying a double-edged sword. Isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if this picture has it or not.
No, I think it's the first canto.
Huh? First canto. Is it in this first canto? In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, first of all, there's unlimited incarnations of God. I don't think there's any in this. I don't think there's any photos at all. Oh.
Only one. Oh no, really?
Anyway, you're gonna. Oh. I don't think it's here. No. Anyway, there's a painting. That's a painting of a description from the Bhagavatam that describes the 10. It's called Das Avatars. It's the 10 prominent incarnations of Krishna, and the last one is called Kalki, and it's in the future. Kalki Avatar, and he's riding a white horse and he's carrying a double-edged sword. Exactly the same image as in Revelations.
The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, or I don't know, is that?
Yeah.
So all 4 of them become one in the canto.
No, the one becomes many.
Okay.
In other words, there's one God, but that one God is unlimited, and he can do anything.
And just one.
And one thing that he does is he can expand himself into different forms in order to please his devotees who are in different moods, who want to see him in a particular way and love him and reciprocate with him in his particular relationship. And therefore there's many incarnations of Krishna. Or sometimes he appears in a certain form to protect a certain devotee in need in a particular way from a particular danger.
So when Jesus Christ speaks of hell, how does that...
It's both. There are hellish planets, and there are hellish situations in this planet. And if you misbehave enough, then you can be placed in your next life in a hellish condition.
Separation from God, which is what is said in the Bible.
Yes,
but
exactly. Actually, real suffering comes from separation of God.
But not an actual hell or realm, but it's...
No, it's both. There is a realm. It's literal, but it's also figurative in terms of condition of consciousness.
And I've heard...
An animal body is a hellish condition because they don't have the capacity to remember God or to think of God or to act in a way to improve themselves or to,
So in some ways it's less a place of torment as opposed to a place of...
Oh, it's torment.
Okay.
Oh, it's torment. You can't wish your way out of it. Just look at any animal in the eye. I don't recommend that you do that. But if you were to look at any animal in the eye, you'll see terror, fear, pure fear.
But not quite
And
so.
if you look at them, if you go toward them, they'll just attack.
Mm.
Or if they're a bird and you approach them, they'll look like this. And even if there's something right in front of them to eat, they'll fly away.
Mm. But it's not quite as dramatic as the Catholic imagery of perdition, or is it similar?
There is perdition, and there are hellish planets that are even more graphic.
Mm.
I think the only difference would be that in the Bible, I don't know how.
This is Shamagore. She's the Universal Mother. She has something to say. We should all listen up. If you think women are not intelligent, just open your ears.
Is that the fundamental difference is in this regard that in Christianity, when I read the Bible, I never read it from Jesus' own mouth. It's more like a later edition.
300 years.
Yeah, basically, that it's eternal. This damnation is eternal, which it isn't, because it's still a material situation.
Correct.
Still parts of the material realm,
Yep.
and by nature, nothing is eternal in the material realm. So even if we experience hellish conditions or even go to hell, it's not forever. It's just for a time that we need to learn a point or correct our behavior or something.
May I elaborate on that?
Yeah. Oh, you have.
Yeah, I have one. I'm going to elaborate on the point she made just now. The soul is eternal. The forms of the material world are temporary. And therefore, sometimes by a person's mentality, by the end of the body, and activity during that life, they deserve an animal body. But psychologically, they would not be able to accept it. If I ask you, okay, I want you to go into the body of a snake, you say, I don't think so. No, I'm not going to do that. So the perdition, a detail that isn't necessarily in the Bible, because like I said, the Bible is true, the Bhagavatam is true, but you won't find everything in the Bible is there in the Bhagavatam, but not everything in the Bhagavatam is in the Bible. It's like the difference between a pocket dictionary and a big, research library dictionary that's volumes long. You won't find everything in that table dictionary in the pocket dictionary, but everything's in the pocket dictionary. You'll find it in the table dictionary. That's the relationship. And it's like that for the same reason I said before, that the persons around Jesus in that culture at that time, they couldn't hear so much. So he told them what they could hear. And he even said, there's more I have to say, but you can't bear to hear it now. But in the future, those will come who will explain more to you about the subject. It's not like the interpreters of the Bible say that thou shalt not kill means just thou shalt not murder human beings. It's not that the animals don't have souls. They have the same symptoms that we do. If you cut them, they cry. If you ever lived with a herd of cows that the mothers have calves, they treat the calves with tremendous affection right from the get-go. As soon as the calf drops, they're right there to clean and take care and make sure that he's comfortable. And if you take the calf away, they will cry and cry and cry, and tears will come from their eyes. So there are symptoms that the soul gives to the material body. According to the material body, that symptom of consciousness comes out and expresses itself in different ways. But the consciousness is the same. Not the same person, not the same individual person, but the same quality of spirit. There are many, many parallels of the teachings in the Bible and the teachings in the Gita. Many parallels. But there are, like I said, there's some that are not exactly the same, but then you have to explain, then you have to understand the depth of the understanding. Like the form, the details of the form, the details of the spiritual world, what goes on there, what are the relationships like, what is the prototype of this reflection, which is the material energy. Like when you look at a mirror, right? You see a form that looks like you. And when all these expert movie makers, they make all kinds of, they can make it look like the person's there just by seeing the reflection. But when you raise your right hand in the mirror, the left hand raises. That's why the ambulance, they have to write ambulance backwards so that in a rear view mirror, the person, in case the siren goes out, they can tell what's coming up so they can get out of the way. And if you move away from the mirror, then what happens? Then the image in the mirror disappears. It's temporary. So the material world is described in the Bhagavad Gita as a reflection of the spiritual world. So all the forms and all the relationships and all the interchange, they're reflections of the reality. So therefore they resemble, or like a mirage, like you see, because of the heat and the sun and reflection off the sand and the desert, you can see water. You can even see sometimes on road, if it's the right condition, you can actually see water.
So with the reflection of so-called demons, because there's some parts of some pastimes by Krishna which involves the killing of demons, which lead to liberation. But speaking of the demonic planets, what Christian theology would call hell, does it?
Again, there are demoniac planets or hellish planets which are more beautiful than the heavenly planets.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
But they're hellish because everything is so nice that there's no chance of wondering, searching for truth. You just all of a sudden die.
You die.
Yeah. You leave your body.
Okay.
The soul leaves the body, but we have all kinds of signs. Like, I'm starting to see the signs a lot because I'm 73 years old and I can't jump and do this and do that, pains and this and that and the other thing. But in the subterranean hellish planets, or the subterranean heavenly planets, which are in a heavenly hellish place, some of the hellish planets, or some of the lower planets, they appear to be more attractive and more pleasant than heaven, than the heavenly planets. But they're hellish because there's no distinction. Like on the earth is the place in the middle of the universe, and you can see both. You can see hellish conditions and you can see heavenly conditions. Now, one more point that I want to add before I go, because I'm already 10 minutes late for my appointment, and that is that when we think of things like this, hellish conditions or events that happen that seem to cause suffering, and why a good God could cause those things to happen like that, it means we're looking at it from our own point of view. But you remember me talking about how when Mahavishnu, who's an expansion of Krishna, glances at the material energy and as the father, and then all the living entities get injected into the material world all at once. Therefore he's called the Supreme Father. Aham bija pradapita. So the time that it takes him to breathe out and breathe back in is the time of the entire cosmic manifestation. From our point of view, this is calculated. This is not allegorical or quatrains that you have to interpret. This is literal. By the rotation of the planets, and time is calculated like that. It's 311 trillion, 80 billion years is the amount of time it takes for Mahavishnu to breathe out and breathe in. And Krishna, he's the source of Mahavishnu, and Mahavishnu is an expansion of an expansion of an expansion. For Krishna, it's not even a blink of the eye. 311 trillion years of our time. So from Krishna's point of view, although we may think that these are horrific events and the suffering is intolerable, for him it's not even a blink of an eye. And when we go back to Godhead, it's like we wake up from a dream. So something that seems very, very serious to us actually isn't in relationship to the overall whole situation. With this knowledge, you can become free from duality and free from suffering and free from illusion and see things as they are. So you can become equipoised, even in the face of all the horrific things that are happening now in the world. And there are horrific things happening as a result of all of the combined activities of human beings on this earth for many, many years, many generations. It's possible to become equipoised. It's possible to become happy, even in the face of seeing all those things. It's how we identify with things that causes us degrees of suffering or degrees of happiness. And with that, I'm going to close the reading for tonight. Hare Krishna. Thank you for your question. Very, very nice questions. All of you asked fantastic questions tonight. Thank you very much to Krishna that whatever I tried to pass on from what I've heard from Srila Prabhupada was satisfying in some way or another, that will cause you to go forward in your spiritual life, in your spiritual development, because that's the goal, to make others happy. Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, everyone. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Sri Krishna ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanandi. See you tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, same time, UK time. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.